Greetings, mortals. I, as you should know by now, am Q. And I'm speaking to you back from my home dimension. And last week I was in another dimension, the land of Cleve, and we'll discuss that in a little bit. But this time, here and now, we are discussing Project Daedalus and the new Star Trek Discovery episode. Now apparently people are seeing an ad, so there might have been a little delay. So in case you don't know who I am, it's Q, of course. And we'll talk about the land of Cleve in a little bit. But first, tonight's episode was actually, in my very informed opinion, a good one. It may actually solve some mysteries about Section 31. Perhaps after this whole incident that's happened in this episode, Section 31 will be disbanded, but not really disbanded. So we will have to see. It's interesting, they're going first with Brainiac, and now it appears to be Skynet. It says my chat is disconnected. I wonder if that's what happened last week. Maybe it's related to that whole bug that happened with Facebook and Instagram and WhatsApp. So we'll have to see what's going on here. I'm going to say hi in the chat and see what happens. It showed up on my end. We'll see. These are not the best for typing. Even Qs have difficulty. We need bigger keyboards. So this episode started out with the whole Burnham being dramatic again, and she had a very interesting interaction with Spock, which I find him far too emotional. I mean, yes, in the cage he was very emotional, and some say that Vulcans don't master their emotions very well until later on in life. I don't buy that. I actually think that Spock was trying to fit in. I've heard that somewhere. He was trying to fit in with the crew of the Enterprise, so he showed emotion even though he really wasn't affected that much by it. Then he went back to his Vulcan self. He said, "I gotta be me," and he was all Spocked out. But then, apparently, now he's getting all angry. I mean, I can understand. Speaking to Michael Burnham for any length of time would make me angry as well. She seems to just be full of herself, and as he was saying, you know, she takes everything upon herself as if she's the most important person in the universe. I really hope that goes away, but it doesn't seem to be going away. There's something about her that's just totally messed up. We'll talk about that later. But the real thing was with Commander Airiam, who was possessed by this Brainiac slash Skynet slash something or other. And she was downloading information about AIs and all kinds of things, apparently, to give to Control. Control, aka Skynet, aka Brainiac, aka the Matrix. Apparently Control wants to become self-aware, wants to take over the universe. Why everyone wants to take over the universe? Trust me, the Q Continuum could do it, but we can't be bothered. It's much more amusing to watch these life forms just messing around. So again, it says that I have one person waiting, which is interesting. I'm going to check with this production person. Am I coming through loud and clear? All right. Say hi in the chat so I know that that's working now. And if it's only my production person in here, then I'm obviously going to be replayed many, many times. And no one is tuned in right now.
One comment from someone else.
Is it a comment down in the comments?
No, it's on the chat.
I'm not actually seeing the chat.
Matt?
That's very interesting.
Matt Nuki. Hello, Omnipotent One.
Ah, Matt. Welcome. Apparently, I am unable to connect to chat, and it says to try again later.
You see my comment?
I don't see any comments. It's very interesting. I'm going to go like this and that, and try pop out chat. And there we go. Pop out worked. Matt is back. Welcome back, Matt. So as I was saying about this episode, and I hope you got it because my wisdom dispersed in this method is just, well, beyond compare, because I am Q. But it was interesting to see Airiam, and we learned a bit about her backstory. Apparently she was fully human and got into an accident. They hinted at it, and she had some type of, relationship with another human. And then there was, after the accident, she was cybernetically rebuilt. The bionic woman, so to speak. And that was very interesting. We learned quite a lot about this character, so much that I was very interested in getting to know her better. Well, if you watch the episode, that ship has sailed. I mean, I could snap my fingers and bring her to me out of a slice of time and get to know her, and I may do that later, but on the show, again, the continuum says I can't interfere. So her mission, her possession by Brainiac, was to get all this information. And that was exciting. You knew something was up with her from episodes ago. And you knew something was going to go wrong. And of course, her finding out about the breathing apparatus on that security officer. What, do you recall that mortal's name? I don't recall her name. She's just, I don't know, Cheeky? We'll call her Cheeky. So, Security Chief Cheeky, I knew as soon as Airiam asked her about her breathing apparatus that that was going to play a role. And I don't understand why, when Airiam aimed a phaser first, she just didn't pull the trigger. I mean, she's a machine with fast reflexes. Seems to me she had the drop on them. But Security Chief Cheeky was able to shoot the phaser away. But overall, an interesting thing, the whole mine thing, which I find it interesting that the Federation would refuse to use mines because it's against their principles. Yet during the Dominion War, I mean, I'm talking, over a century from the current storyline, they used replicating mines. And they had no problem with that. So apparently, these Federation principles get thrown out the window whenever there's a conflict. And of course, whenever Section 31's involved. And apparently, Spock was framed, and it was a hologram. So Section 31 had access to some immensely advanced holographic imaging software to make Spock look like a murderer, and to make that Vulcan admiral seem to be alive. That does bother me, Maiden. I mean, she was having this conversation. She had locked Airiam in the airlock, and she could not run over and at least check on her comrade, see what was going on with her, because, you know, no more cheeky, breathy stuff. She's very, very self-centered, this Michael Burnham. And she did not want to obey the order, which I can understand. Apparently, Airiam has a personality, which we just discovered. And she wanted to try to blast open the door and destroy control or whatever. And it was clear that she wasn't going to be able to do it in time. So, and she didn't actually pull the switch. It was Security Chief Cheeky, who, without Burnham's help, managed to get her breathing apparatus back into place so that she wouldn't die. So concerned, this Burnham. Still, overall, an enjoyable episode. The dramatic looks on Burnham's face notwithstanding. And I give it a thumbs up. Pike, he has grown on me so much I may actually have to try on his skin at some point. We'll have to see. But I like Pike. Tilly, with her little appeal to Airiam that seemed a little cheesy, and then she sent over the memory and managed to snap part of Airiam out, but not her motor control functions. And that manual override seems to take a very long time. You would think if you're in an airlock and you need to manually override the door, you might need to get in quickly. That seemed a bit contrived. So, good episode overall. My main problem was this great tragic loss of Airiam, and we were just getting to know her. They did not have any backstory in any previous episodes. We haven't come to care about her. So whereas it's a shame we don't get to meet this apparently very deep character with all kinds of history and tragedy and all this humor, yeah, it doesn't make sense to me that the writers set up this tragedy without, I don't know, giving her some more lines previously, maybe having some more interactions with the crew, so we could get to know her, so it could affect us more. As it is, I mean, if I cared about what Burnham thought, I would probably be empathetic to her look of horror, but I don't really care about Burnham. Tilly, a little bit. Her upset kind of affected me. It's an interesting thing about the death of characters. It's the character itself. The death doesn't bother us that much. Sure, we might miss the character, but what really affects us is how that character's death affects everyone else. And I'm sure next episode we will have all kinds of reason to be touched by this loss. But still, we didn't know the character, so our caring, not that much. Production person, are there more chat things coming up? Because the last thing I see is you talking about Cheeky. All right, then there's not too much to say. Now, last week someone did ask me to go back to the previous episode and just talk a little bit more about that, because I was in the land of Cleve and the internet connection was not exactly the best. So, last week's episode I did, as I mentioned, enjoy the throwback and the homage to the original Cage, and how they actually showed that morph from the original actor to the new Captain Pike. It was pretty smooth. But the Tholians, in some way, they're not quite up to the Organian level. They are a bit of a nuisance. I did find it interesting that in the mirror universe, that they were just wiped out by the Empress, who seemed quite proud of that. But getting back to Section 31, last week's episode, I think I really covered most of that in last live stream, so watch that. But again, I enjoyed a lot of last week, except any scene with Burnham in it. This week, it seems that with Section 31 becoming dubious, that it may be that Section 31 will again be disbanded because of this whole control thing. So by the end of the season, Section 31 might be nothing but a memory, which no one remembers when Deep Space Nine comes out. It actually could be something that Section 31 is kind of like, maybe not stricken from the record, but buried in the records. I would actually think stricken, because if I was Bashir on the space station, Deep Space Nine, and I was approached by Section 31, I would be using whatever they use for Google in that time period and looking them up, and I'm sure he would find all kinds of information, but he finds nothing. So perhaps when Section 31 disappears, they kind of quietly erase the records. And therefore, it's not taught at the academy. It's not exactly something they're proud of. So maybe this solves the dilemma. Maybe this is another one of their attempts to retcon things like Klingon hair. But we will have to see how the season plays out. But I imagine that Section 31 has become organization non grata. So what do you think? Matt, if you're there, any questions, thoughts, concerns? What did you think of Airiam? Do you see a missed opportunity as I do? Of course, most of you humans miss all kinds of opportunities. I am looking at the chat. Nothing's going on. Correct, production person? It's not just this dread device here, is it?
No.
Very well. I feel like I'm in the land of Cleve once again. Well, that is my verdict. This was an overall good episode, except for any scene with Burnham in it, and Spock again a little too emotional. It's not like he's got some kind of plant affecting him in this particular episode. It's just, maybe he's a little cuckoo. Maybe that excuses it, but again, I'm not totally buying Spock as Spock. What can I say? So for now, I guess that concludes my judgment, and I will see you all next week as my torture continues, as I continue to have to watch these episodes. But then I get to torture you, teach you with my grand wisdom. So we will continue next week. I will give you my verdict then. My verdict on this one is 80%. But remember, the trial is never over.